Have you ever noticed how some stories begin with a hidden prejudice tucked into a simple glance? Imagine walking into a store and, within seconds, realizing you're not welcome just because of how you're dressed or the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened to Jamal, a young black man who entered a luxury store and ended up being followed by security under suspicion of not being there to buy anything. It sounds absurd, but it's more common than we think. But what seemed like just another typical case of prejudice turned into something unbelievable. Days after that uncomfortable incident, Jamal returned to that same store, this time not as a suspicious customer, but as the brand's new official partner. How did that happen? Simple. He chose not to let prejudice define who he was. Instead, he used that pain to create something transformative. And here's something important for you to reflect on right now. How many times have you held back out of fear of being judged? Jamal's story shows us the opposite of what many believe, that prejudice can be the very fuel for a major breakthrough. And what if I told you the same thing could happen to you? Because that's exactly what we're about to explore. He walked in like someone who didn't know anyone anything. A basic t-shirt, jeans, and a cap, the kind you'd see on any street corner in the hood. But the moment he passed through the glass doors of that fancy mall store, everything changed. Jamal, a young black man, had barely taken 2 steps when he noticed he wasn't welcome. A security guard, with that look of suspicion mixed with superiority, began to follow him, as if waiting for the slip-up to justify the judgment made in the first second. And all this without a single word spoken. It's strange how appearances alone still shape so many stories. How many times have you been looked up and down just for not fitting in with a certain place? It happens in bank lines, job interviews, elevators. It's not rare, it's routine. And if you think that's an exaggeration, try walking into a 5-star restaurant wearing a worn-out hoodie. The reactions say more than 1,000 words. What happened to Jamal is just a magnified image of an old wound, barely healed. But the most subtle and most cruel part is the silence. No one says anything, but everyone speaks with their eyes. The body reveals the tension. The security guard's step reveals the bias. And even those who don't participate remain silent. And you know what's worse? Some people think this is normal, as if certain people must prove every single minute that they belong. But this story is far from over. What comes next will show that some stories have the power to flip the script without anyone seeing it coming. Jamal kept walking through the store, now with an invisible weight on his shoulders. It wasn't the price tags or the fancy environment, but the silent judgment all around him. Every step felt calculated, every movement scrutinized. He reached for a coat and already felt the security guard's eyes burning into the back of his neck. It's like trying to breathe deeply while someone watches your every move, expecting a mistake like it's inevitable. And that, my friend, drains your soul. Have you ever felt something similar? That sense of being watched, not for who you are, but for what you appear to be? It's as if the place itself says, you don't belong here. Many young black people from marginalized communities live that daily, whether trying to open a bank account, visiting a university, or, like Jamal, simply window shopping. These stories repeat themselves with different characters, but unfortunately, the script is always the same. And the hardest part is that, even without doing anything wrong, you just want to leave. To escape that accusing stare, Jamal left the store without buying anything. Not because he couldn't afford it, but because he realized he wasn't being treated like a customer. That says a lot. And the strange thing is, outsiders often don't notice the violence hidden behind forced politeness. But behind that quiet retreat, something bigger was taking shape, and this story was about to make some noise. What no one in that store knew, not the security guard, not the salespeople, not the nearby customers, was that Jamal was much more than he seemed. Behind the simplicity of his clothes was a young entrepreneur, founder of a sustainable fashion startup with a social focus. He had already been featured in renowned magazines, spoken at international events, and closed partnerships with major brands. While they judged his cap, they ignored the brilliant mind behind that calm expression. And that's where life teaches us. Labels are mental shortcuts, but they often lead us to dead ends. Jamal didn't fit the expected profile for that store, but he might have been the only one there who truly understood the value of purposeful fashion. While most were dazzled by the store's shine, he saw transformation behind every piece. And here's the insight. If you have a project, an idea, or a talent that the world hasn't recognized yet. Don't hide it for fear of seeming out of place. The world needs more stories like Jamal's. The great irony is that Jamal would never have become a reference if he had waited for validation. He built his path through hard work, study, and most importantly, vision. And that's a powerful lesson. Appearance might open doors, but it's substance that sustains achievement. While he was watched like a suspect, he was already being followed online by thousands who admired his work. And all of this was about to gain a new dimension, with a twist no one saw coming. Jamal didn't record the video out of revenge, but out of a need to breathe. He sat in his room, turned on his phone camera, and shared his experience with an open heart. No naming names, no direct accusations, just the facts, from the security guard's stare to the discomfort that drove him away. Within minutes, the video gained traction. And when a story is true, it hits where it needs to. His pain became a mirror for many. The post went viral like fire in dry grass. Comments from people who had gone through the same. Shares, likes, and more importantly, reflection. Influencers, activists, artists, and even former employees of major brands began to speak up. The video wasn't just about Jamal. It was about thousands of others who had been reduced to their skin color or their style. A simple recording turned into a living manifesto against structural racism and shallow judgments. And here comes the twist. Many brands started moving. Some silently, others trying to ride the visibility wave. But one brand was directly involved. Jamal's video was creating a kind of positive discomfort, the kind that pushes change. And while the comments kept coming, something bigger was about to happen. Something no one expected, not even Jamal. A few days later, the unexpected happened. Jamal's phone rang. On the other end of the line, someone from the brand behind the store. It wasn't an empty, automated apology. It was a human, direct conversation, acknowledging the mistake and requesting a meeting. They wanted to better understand what had happened, but more than that, they were willing to listen. And listening, in cases like this, is already a revolutionary act. Because every transformation begins with discomfort. Jamal, even with every right to refuse, accepted the meeting. He saw an opportunity to turn pain into a bridge. In the meeting with the brand's executives, he spoke about representation, respect, and how small attitudes can build or destroy great stories. What impressed them wasn't just his clarity, but his visionary mindset. While many would demand justice, he saw opportunity to educate, to include, to open doors for others like him. And here comes the big turning point. The proposal wasn't just to fix a mistake, but to create something new with real purpose. The conversation became an idea. The idea became a project. And Jamal, who had been judged by what he wore, was now invited to help the brand rethink the system from the inside out. That phone call was the beginning of a new story, and it still had a lot to tell. Jamal didn't want the spotlight. He wanted real change. So instead of accepting a simple apology, he proposed something bigger, a campaign for awareness about inclusion and respect. But not just any campaign, one that gave a voice to the people who are usually ignored in the world of fashion and luxury consumption. People from the hood, from the streets, where dreams aren't wrapped in silk but forged in daily resilience. Stories no one usually tells. The idea was clear. Use the system itself to spark transformation. With his entrepreneurial background, Jamal suggested the campaign feature real people. No filters, no stereotypes. He knew the power of a good narrative, and more importantly, the impact of seeing someone like you featured in a storefront where, just yesterday, you were treated like a threat. This was more than marketing. It was symbolic reparations. It was proof that luxury can, and should, have a conversation with reality. And here's the genius move. Jamal didn't want to be the sole focus. He opened the door for other creative youth from the community to be part of the project. Rappers, seamstresses, independent photographers, self-taught designers. A new aesthetic of resistance and belonging was born. A showcase of forgotten talents now had a stage, a platform, and a voice. And they had no idea the next step in this story would be even more symbolic and deeply impactful. Days later, the very mall that had once rejected him witnessed a historic moment. Jamal returned, but this time, not as a visitor, as the face of the brand's new campaign. Wearing clothes designed by peripheral stylists, alongside other creative young people, he walked with a confident smile. It wasn't just a campaign, it was a living manifesto. A reminder that some stories don't fade away, they're written in bold. And guess who else was there? The same security guard who had followed him days earlier. Clearly embarrassed, he was now taking part in a mandatory training on diversity and inclusion. Not as punishment, but as a learning opportunity. Because changing the world isn't about eliminating people, it's about educating them. Jamal, in fact, made a point not to feed hate. He said everyone has their own story, and some just need a new chapter to shift directions. The store, once a symbol of exclusion, became a platform for representation. The storefronts now showcased diverse faces and bodies. The looks that once judged, now admired. Customers filmed, employees smiled, and the brand began to reap the rewards of a bold decision, to listen to those who were once silenced. But this turning point still had more seeds to plant. What happened next surprised everyone, and gave this story its deepest meaning. More than a beautiful campaign, Jamal wanted to leave a legacy. That's when he proposed something transformative to the brand. The creation of a scholarship and mentorship program for young Black and underprivileged individuals. The idea was clear, it wasn't enough to occupy spaces. More people needed to be prepared to reach them with confidence. Education, knowledge, and opportunity, three pillars that build lasting stories. Surprisingly, the brand agreed. The project didn't stay on paper. Fashion, tech, and entrepreneurship workshops were organized in communities where survival used to be the only topic. Talented young people without access now had guidance, tools, and, above all, perspective. And the best part, Jamal not only helped design the structure, he became the official ambassador of the initiative. It was the hood speaking about the future with authority, leading the way with eyes on the horizon. This movement triggered a ripple effect. Other brands began to watch, to move, to rethink their actions. The impact went beyond fashion. It was social, educational, human. The stories of these young people were finally being written with dignity, visibility, and voice. But Jamal's journey still had one more step. Because every true transformation needs something symbolic, recognition. And that moment was about to happen, publicly. The event was announced as a celebration of the brand's new phase, but what happened there was much deeper. In a packed auditorium, with press, clients, and collaborators present, the store's director took the stage, grabbed the microphone, and did what few have the courage to do. Publicly apologized. No dodging. He acknowledged the mistake, spoke about structural racism, and announced the company was reviewing its internal policies. It was a rare moment, where ego gave way to humility. When Jamal was called to the stage, he didn't gloat. His speech was firm, but generous. He didn't want to attack, but to build. He said respect isn't negotiable, it's something you practice. That everyone, regardless of appearance, has the right to be treated with dignity. And that recognizing a mistake is important, but learning from it is essential. The most powerful stories are those where people have the courage to change and show it to the world. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Not just for Jamal, but for everything he represented. He had become a symbol of transformation, someone who faced prejudice not with hate, but with wisdom. And the most inspiring part? He wasn't stopping there. That event, as emotional as it was just another chapter in his journey. Because the real story, the one no one expected, was still being written, step by step, inside the same store where it all began. Now it was different. Jamal walked into the store with his head held high, wearing the same cap as before, but this time, as an official partner of the brand. No sideways glances, no security guard tracking his every move. Everything had changed. It was as if time had rewound to rewrite that scene, but now with justice. Jamal wasn't seeking revenge. He was seeking transformation. And in that moment, he represented everyone who had ever been judged before even speaking a word. The displays showed more than fashion. They told stories of resilience, of overcoming, of change. Ordinary people of different colors, styles, and backgrounds proudly represented the new collection. The brand, which once silenced without realizing, now used its voice to amplify others. And Jamal, with the serenity of someone who knows his worth, walked through the aisles as if saying, "It's not appearance that defines a person, it's their actions after the mistake that reveal who's truly willing to grow." And that's how a painful situation gave rise to a new narrative. One that inspires, provokes, and changes realities. Jamal didn't become a hero by chance. He refused to be a victim and chose to be a bridge. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Some stories are born from prejudice, but they can bloom into examples. And now, looking back at everything that happened, the question remains. What would you do if you had the chance to change an entire system with your own story? Now that you've heard the full story, let me ask you, how many times have you been underestimated before anyone even heard your voice? How many doors were closed just because someone didn't see your value? Jamal's great turning point teaches us that appearance might be judged at first glance, but it's attitude that changes everything. And more than that, every pain can become a bridge, every humiliation a stage, if you have the courage to transform it. So, what are you doing today that brings you closer to your own breakthrough? Are you hiding to avoid causing discomfort? Or are you building something that, in the future, will leave the world speechless? Reflect on that. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear so they don't give up, but it will only inspire if you have the courage to live it fully. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs real people who turn pain into purpose, like Jamal did. If this message touched you in any way, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us on this journey of transformation. Because here, every video is more than content. It's fuel for those who truly want to grow. And remember, no one defines you by what you look like, but you can define a lot by what you choose to do from this moment on.